Hello, hello, hello. Thank you. Thank you very much. This is episode 12, number 12 in this series I'm doing, series of stories and testimonies showing the ridiculous journey that I insisted on walking through and in surviving as I persevered through terrible decisions and choices in my life as I was floundering, trying to make sense of what was going on in my brain, my mental health and depression, all those things I've been talking about through all 11 of the previous stories. So I'm going to get right into it. Things are going to get a little nuts. Some of the details of these next few stories, they're going to start getting a bit gritty and dark and a little grimy. Sorry about that, but as I said last time, I promise my intention in doing this section of my life is not to over sensationalize drug use. I am just trying to show how quickly one can fall down the rabbit hole. And I dove head first. I just gave myself up to it, but thankfully at no point did God ever lose sight of me, because he was helping me get through my terrible choices. So, okay, my first major pot hookup that I was doing on my own, it was at this fairly nice apartment. For the life of me, I cannot remember how I made this connection. I know it didn't come from Jake or Mark. So, but it doesn't matter. Who cares? No big deal. The point I'm trying to make is the major rush I got every time going by myself to pick up my fix was off the charts. I loved it. It was an incredible feeling. This place was always bustling with traffic. The parking lot at this apartment was just constantly full of these idling cars because their owners were quickly dipped inside real fast to grab whatever they were grabbing and to fly out like their pants are on fire in minutes. It was just ridiculous. It was this constant thing. And once you got inside, there was people everywhere milling around. This drug den, for the most part, didn't look like any drug den you've seen in a movie. It was nice and pleasant, and it was just a very chill environment. The dealers, there were three of them, all running their enterprise out of this apartment, they were super cool. The clients, for the most part, were like college kids or 20-somethings with jobs. They were responsible citizens just coming there. I don't remember a single stereotypical crackhead at one point being there. However, you could score that if that was on the menu for the night, because these three cats, they sold everything they could get their hands on out of that apartment. It was a one-stop shop for sure. Me personally, I don't care about all the other stuff going on in the background. I was only there for the pot, and it was plentiful and high grade and expensive, and I had the money to afford it. So the attention this place drew was just absurd, as you can probably imagine. Just this constant influx of traffic coming and going. They might as well have put up like this giant sky spotlight bat signal, hey, come over here, get your drugs. It was just ridiculous. It was also a nice neighborhood. So, these are nice people, law-abiding people who this constant traffic coming and going out of their parking lot. So there was no way this place was going to stay under the radar for long, and it didn't, believe me. It got raided big time. All three dealers were locked up. Everyone there at that time was hauled away in cuffs. Thankfully, I was not there at that moment. I think I got there and I'm like, this place is kind of slow, and no one knocking at the door. You just have to even knock because people were constantly coming and going. I'm sure I called whoever it was that I got this hookup from to begin with. It was like, what happened? He told me what happened. I'm like, oh my word. I'm so glad I wasn't here. And the thing is, this would not be the one and only time I narrowly avoided a drug raid. At the tail end of my time in Denver, I barely escaped that too, but down the road. So the problem is, though, now I needed a new hookup. And I had to go back to depending on Jake, which really wasn't that big of a deal. Who cares? I'll still get my fix. But it was a rush. It was an absolute rush. Like I said, picking this up on myself. The adrenaline of getting away with it, like going in, getting what I wanted, and leaving that parking lot, and at no point seeing swirly red and blue lights behind me. It was just an absolute adrenaline rush. I was becoming as addicted to that high as I was to the drug high itself. So, step by step, I was fully embracing this unrestrained life of sin that I was engrossed in. It was incredibly distracting. I was no longer feeling my soul-crushing, undiagnosed, took to this point anyway, manic depression and PTSD. The constant war zone chaos in my brain was just slowed down. It was a nice, steady, peaceful drive through a flowery meadow. And I loved it. I loved that feeling. I was also loving the feeling of getting away with, going and buying it. But that's all right, because a new prescribing doctor was just coming up the bend. I told you last time that I was about to meet somebody new. I hinted at that. And looking back, the whole situation was so serendipitous. I'd also talked about this new company I was working for and how it was like the top 3 performers, whatever. I was doing a really good job. So they had hired a new girl, and the bosses had trusted me, my ability to be able to train her. So they did. They had me train her. I'm going to call her Emily. She just needed some help getting the ball rolling. She was very intelligent, but they wanted me to kind of help show her some of the shortcuts to how to maximize her time and get as much work done in the day. I'm going to very quickly, I'm not trying to bore you with these details, but just to get an idea of what it was I did this job. It was basically drafting. So at that time, and it might still be, I don't know, Denver was just growing rapidly. It was an amazing city. It was a ton of good jobs there. So lots of new families were moving in there, which meant the new suburbs had to be made to accommodate all these new people. And those new neighborhoods, they needed a new infrastructure for cable service, which is where my company came into place. People would go out, they had people go out and hand draw like all the new neighborhoods section by section. And it was my job to take those hand-drawn maps, which were basically blueprints, and convert them into digital printouts on the computer. So I was paid by how much square footage I recreated on the computer. So I was basically paid by square footage. It was incredibly fun and satisfying. I loved it. As I said, I was really good at it, so much so that the company was planning on training me in AutoCAD, which would have made me even more money. Future was looking really bright for me. There was nothing but sunny skies that I could see on my path. But, that wasn't until this new girl came in and I needed to train her. I'm going to get this out of the way right now, okay? There was never anything remotely romantic between us. Nothing. She was a happily married woman. She was just this outstanding and amazingly cool girl. She was just amazing. And I think she was 2 years older than me, if I remember correctly. So she kind of took this big sister role, and we hit it off. We hit it off immediately. We were like this platonic kindred spirits. I don't think I've ever had a more deeper, more non-intimate relationship with another woman before. Looking back, I can now see what was happening with my 2020 hindsight. This whole setup was very purposeful. So, because we were hitting it off so splendidly, she invited me to come have lunch with her husband one day. I'm calling him Dave. Dave was this non-traditional computer genius. There wasn't a single computer nerd bone in his body. He was just a very cool dude. He had self-taught himself Java and a bunch of other ridiculously hard computer programming stuff that was so over my head. And he also had this amazing job at a company that was not too far from where Emily and I worked. So, we got together for lunch on a regular basis. And, not to my knowledge, I don't think he was ever threatened by me. He knew, he wasn't worried whatsoever. Him and Emily, they were just so ridiculously in sync. He didn't care. They were soulmates. They were a total power couple. They only had eyes for each other. So he never really worried about it. So I was beginning to have lunch more and more with her and Dave on a regular basis. And because, our company wasn't beholden to a traditional hourly job rate, we or time where it would be 30 minutes or 60 minutes for lunch or whatever. We could stay as long as we wanted. 2-3 hour lunches didn't matter, just as long as we were getting our work done. And it also didn't matter how many hours we put in. We could come in on the weekends because we had our own key fob to the building. We could work all night. It didn't matter. We never had to go home if we didn't feel like it. It was endless. There was no limit to the amount of money you could make there if you felt like it. So after one particular lunch meeting or outing, Emily and I rode with her. She drove us back, and we're just sitting in the parking lot. It was a beautiful day. I'm sure it was late spring, and we're really in no hurry to get back in. We didn't really care. So we decided to kind of hang out in the car and talk for a while. She started getting like weird and awkward at me, and I was started getting nervous, and I'm like, what's your problem? It was like she was kind of psyching herself up to tell me something. So she suddenly blurts out, "Do you smoke pot?" I'm like, what? Yeah, that was not what I was expecting to come out of her mouth. I loved my job. I was working really hard to keep my outside life a secret. So she had no idea. She had no idea I was a pothead. So I kind of smiled and said, yeah, big time. I love the stuff. But I was trying really hard to, not smoke during the day. I was trying very hard to keep myself in check. But problem was her asking me that got me thinking, which then got me one step closer to that cliff edge that was overlooking that rabbit hole about to dive into. So up to this point, I would never get high during the day if I had responsibilities that needed my attention. I was always only at night. I was doing a good job. But hearing her tell me this and ask me this, I'm like, how on earth would you get any work done if you go back up there stoned? She's like, I've been smoking since I was a teenager. It doesn't bother me anymore at this point. It has no effect on my work. Me, however, I think it was even 6 months at this point that I had been smoking. So it completely made me worthless for hours on end. But I didn't want to look like a wuss in front of her. And I'm like ignoring the beep, 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 warning bells going off in my head that this is a really bad idea. I'm like, sure, why not? One time won't hurt. Oh, man. No surprise. I made my way back up to the office, and I was worthless. I got nothing done that day. I just kind of stared at my computer. So after a couple hours of wasted time, I'm like, I'm sober enough to go home. So I called the day, went home. Well, this quickly became a routine for us. We would basically go and get stoned on lunch every day, even after I stopped training her. I foolishly convinced myself that I could keep up this routine while still putting in my usual amount of work. But no, absolutely not. I was completely wrong. My work suffered. Eventually, I was fired. No surprise. Cutting to the chase there. Not because I was getting high at work. I don't think they ever knew that. But because my production had dropped to almost nil. And what I did get done was so riddled with the mistakes, and it was a disaster. It was pathetic. It was like, a 4-year-old to put this thing together. But that happens down the road just a little bit. I kept up appearances for about a month because one more major player needs to be introduced into this whole scene of my time in Denver. And also, we're going to call it a country-shattering historical event that really still affects our lives 2+ decades later. That also needs to happen during my time working at this place. But I'll tell that story next time. As always, I just thank you for sticking with me on these stories. There's tons and tons of stuff that still needs to happen before God will rescue my battered, tattered, dirty body from the pig pen and bring me home. But he's going to do that in his perfect time and in his perfect way, because God is a master at sculpting beauty from chaos. So finish up this story with one quick admonition for those of you who are struggling with mental health, struggling with the big questions of what life is all about and what's the point and what am I doing here? Yes, those are two separate things, but in reality, they're also the same thing. Even for those of you who don't suffer from mental health, if you're honest with yourself, you will admit that there's just something absent. There's something missing in your life. And I'm here to tell you that missing thing is Jesus. I keep saying it. I'm not going to stop saying it. Jesus is the answer. There's an emptiness inside of us that can only be satisfied and filled by who Jesus is and by what he has done on the cross for our behalf. If we don't bow now, we will bow in the next life. I think I've said that before. Don't wait till then, because at that point it's too late. Jesus said that, I never knew you. It's too late. And why am I saying this? Why am I saying these harsh and seemingly unloving things? I'm saying it because the Bible says it. And the Bible is inerrant, which means there are no errors. It can be trusted for what it says. If you have a hard time even accepting the Bible's inerrant, it's full of mistakes. And, I just saw last week on a History Channel special that there's mistakes in the Bible. Stop and ask yourself, be honest with yourself. Why are there History Channel specials trying to convince us that the Bible is false? Where's the specials about anything else, about any other book? They don't exist because it doesn't matter. There's been centuries and centuries of people trying to destroy the Bible. There are people in this day and age who are trapped in communist countries who are willing to die just to get their hands on a Bible. Anyone willing to die for any other book? I don't think so. So what's the deal? Why the Bible? Think about that for a little bit. Let that sink in. Why? Why are people willing to die for the Bible, and why are people so determined to destroy it? Because it's true. Read it. Go to my website. There's links on there to help guide you through different passages in the Scripture. If you don't know where to begin, like the Bible seems boring and stuffy. I understand. I get it. But it's not. If you come at it with honest eyes and read it and pray and ask God to open your eyes to help you understand what you're reading, I promise you, it will come to light. It will make sense if you are humbly coming and asking and praying and seeking. Okay, done for preaching hour. I will talk to you next time, my friends. As I said, things are going to start getting even more crazy. I'll talk to you then. Until then, keep pressing on.